I am an African.
Welcome to another episode of Africa for Dummies, A4D, your podcast for politics and economics. Although, as I said in the previous episode, we're doing much more politics these days. So this episode will be focusing on the Kenyan protests, as was the previous one. But in this case, we're going to be talking to an actual participant in the protests. Of course, you're joined by myself, Zenge, and co-host Nathan. Welcome back, Nathan.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Sorry for not being available, but work-life balance has kind of been a challenge. But it's great to be back. Love to have these podcasts, and unfortunately, as usual, back in some not so good times. But it's good to be here.
Yeah. I mean, some shaky times, of course. And to walk us through these shaky times and just give us a gist of what ordinary people are thinking about, we've got one of the participants of the protest, Mutua Kiania, from Nairobi, if I'm not mistaken, aka Tush. And he participated in the Tuesday protests on the 25th of June, 2024 against the finance bill, the infamous finance bill that has sort of rocked the nation the past few days. Welcome to A4D, Mutua. It's a pleasure having you here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Nice to be here.
Yeah, so it's as Zengi said, pleasure. Thank you for coming on. I guess my interest is always in finding out the motivating factor as to what really made you, get up. And I think usually when you have protests in African countries, they are seldom peaceful. So I'm assuming that in your mind, you also sort of knew already that, there was going to be some sort of pushback potentially when a protest like this happened. So kind of just walk us through what was going on in your thought process to sort of get up and say like, no, you know what, now I need to go out there and show my unhappiness with this decision.
Well, I'd say leading up to it, for my mindset, I'd been, it had just been a build-up of frustration after frustration, increased taxes every other year, increased cuts on your pay, and general poor services. Initially, if you'd talked to me like 3 weeks ago, I do not think I would have thought I'd be protesting for my leaders to listen to me. But what really made me go out was the remarks by some of the leaders in the country, and talking down to us like we are less than, and also general frustration. My friends also participated in the previous week's protests, and they encouraged me to join them. And so decided to go out and show them that we have the numbers.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think you mentioned that 3 weeks ago you wouldn't have, but sort of this, combination of various different factors, leaders talking down to you, things actually not really working out economically and all these sort of things. But I'm also very curious because it seemed like, correct me if I'm wrong here, but it seemed like Kenya was kind of getting off of a recent high in terms of, you have this new face in Kenyan politics with, I forget his first name, but President Ruto. And then now kind of William Ruto, and now you have this sort of unhappiness with him or disagreement with him. Was that always expected that William Ruto was going to kind of make these decisions, or was it a complete 180 in terms of promises?
So William Ruto, not really a new face in Kenyan politics. He was deputy president, served as a member of parliament from the 90s. But during his campaigns in 2022, his biggest platform was that it was going to be a government for the small people. So essentially, booming, people expected booming business and just a general sense of, I think his term for it was bottom up, a bottom up economy where the most people in the economy at the very bottom of the pyramid would be having access to opportunity. But what really happened when the government came in was massive corruption,
Oh,
massive shows of opulence, and we did not expect taxes to go high this much. I think also another thing is I don't think they understand that you can't tax a country into prosperity. Yeah,
mm, mm.
yeah.
That's a very good point. Could you mention some of the taxes that at least you could remember that you thought were really going to that you really didn't agree with, or that you really were like, no, this is too much.
I would say Kenya being a developing country, um, I I am of the opinion that we should actually lower taxes so that more people have money, so that there's money in the economy, spurring growth. But some of the taxes, so last year, um, they did decide to bring in a housing levy, and the tactic by government to essentially pass things starting in 2023 is to make very outrageous claims of what they're going to tax, then coming back and just basically making them a little bit less. So last year we had the housing levy imposed. Initially, the suggestion was for it to be 6%, but then you would have access. It would be like a fund. So the way you contribute to your pension, you contribute to housing, you'll be able to have access to that. The government will build houses that you can buy that are affordable. Um, but then they went ahead and moved it from 6% to 3%. Then they previously there was a cap on it, like you couldn't pay more than I believe it was 15,000. Right now, they lowered it to 3%, removed the cap on the tax, and now it's a levy, so you don't get access to that money at all. It's generally a tax. It's now no longer a fund. And
Mm.
yeah, so coming into this year, they threatened to tax bread. They threatened to introduce a car, was it a car tax? So essentially, when you buy a car in Kenya, initially there's the purchase price. Most people just buy second-hand vehicles from the UK or from Japan. You import the car, you paid the purchase price, then the duties and levies and taxes when you import a vehicle almost match the cost of the vehicle. So you can
Wow.
buy a car for 20,000 pounds, and the tax on it will be about 16,000, 17,000 pounds
Wow.
for you to have it cleared and registered. So the vehicle is gonna cost you like 37,000 pounds. And
Wow.
on top of that, they were going to add a 2% tax on motor vehicle owners, for example. So which doesn't make sense because on top of the import duties we already pay, the fuel we use to run the vehicles is also very heavily taxed. I think the price of fuel per liter, I think about 50% of it is just taxes and levies, road development levies, VAT, and the likes. So it's basically double taxation. And yeah, so that was very frustrating. So This year, they threatened to have that. They're also imposing a tax on investments for government bonds. So previously, infrastructure bonds did not attract tax. So they were very attractive for investors, both locally and foreign investors. But the introduction of a withholding tax would make them less attractive. Yeah, because if you're gonna impose a withholding tax, then the return tends to go a little bit lower. And I'd say the one I was really mad about was the vehicle tax, because essentially if you own let's say a Land Rover Defender. In Kenya, it costs about 20 million shillings. Should come to about, is it 130,000 pounds? So for the tax at 2%, it was capped at 100,000. So someone who has a vehicle worth 2 million shillings would pay 2% of that. That's 20,000, about 20, that's actually 40,000 for a vehicle worth 2 million shillings. And someone who has a vehicle worth 20 million shillings would pay 100,000. So someone is driving a vehicle that's 10 times the value, but only paying double the tax. And that did not seem like a fair thing. If it was supposed to be a tax for generally, how do I phrase this? A tax for rich people, then why are you saving the people who are likely to be mostly hit by it?
Yeah, I just checked the so it's like I think in US dollars it's 155 US dollars, 55,000 US dollars. That's with that 20 million shilling example. That would be 155,000 US dollars. And I think when you look at this type of tax, also for guys around our age, if you're trying to make an extra buck aside from uni or something, what if you have like an Uber situation, or you want to buy a car or you get a loan to buy a car for Uber? That's definitely going to be, something that could rub people the wrong way. When I was thinking about it, I was like, okay, how could a car tax be so upsetting? And then it's like, okay, no.
And you know
when it
what's
comes to-
crazy is sorry to cut you off, but you know the crazy thing is he just, if I'm not, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you just mentioned the taxes that are only like bringing the car in like to where you are. So I don't think it even includes the other payments and fees that you're going to have to pay, like insurance, like paying for the number plates and like the fitness and all that type of stuff. So that's like even more. So like that's not even including you getting the car ready for it to be on the road, so like that's really intense.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say there's quite a lot of things that was mentioned, even like although I think this was an initial one and they scrapped it, something to do with sanity towels. Yeah, that was also quite out there, although they removed it. But then, so when Tuesday came, but first of all, now actually, before I ask this question, the level of understanding it takes of a tax bill, I saw something, a politician was demeaning basically young Kenyans and saying, oh, they're coming to protest in Ubers, they're coming with KFC, and then they go back home with Netflix and so. But when you like, for you to be able to understand the tax process, especially considering how sometimes policy can be very confusing, would you say there was a deep conversation, and where was this happening? Like because the perception about like our generation is that we don't really care that much about these things like tax policies and bill. If a bill passes in parliament in most of our countries, it just be like, okay, whatever. But when you hear, like, for example, just as you are speaking and explaining the tax policies, it's quite in depth, you know. So how were so many people able to engage with this type of conversation? Was it like I don't know, were there particular people that were explaining them on TikTok, on Instagram, on Snapchat, or yeah? So people have kind of taken aback by how advanced sort of Kenya's political culture is, especially among young people, for them to protest a tax bill. Normally, it's something more obvious, like, okay, this opposition leader got arrested, or, you know, an election was rigged, right? So, yeah.
I'd say social media has been a really big help because initially then you also have your audit firms and the likes that did breakdowns of the tax bill. So essentially, when people got the highlights of it, guys started discussing it on Twitter, on TikTok, basically everywhere. And guys were like, that's actually very oppressive. You know, when you're coming for my pocket, you're coming into my pocket to take out more, then I have to say something about it. You can't just be oppressed in silence. So a lot of guys mobilized on Twitter um and on TikTok and the likes, and guys got charged because on top of the tax bill, the government also released its budget, whereby the president and the government allocated massive amounts of money to their spouses for their offices. Like, you know, I think it was about 600 million and to renovate the deputy president's house, a house that was constructed using 400 million, roughly about 10, 13 years ago, and you're spending 600 million to renovate it, that's about 5 million USD. I mean,
Yeah,
it
I
would be
just checked
cheaper to
600
get
million is
another
about 5
house.
million.
Yeah, it would be cheaper to get another house because essentially what was going to happen, what is going to happen, or we're not really sure at this point, is that most of that money is going to go into someone's pocket. It's gonna be stolen. They're gonna inflate the prices of things, and yeah, that's unfair. You want to come back into my pocket to take more money so that you can enjoy life and not practice any form of austerity given the global economic conditions at the moment.
Yeah, no, that's it's very profound. But I want to get back to sort of the question of the conditions that are there for that sort of brought out this protest. If you look at like neighboring countries around, Uganda, Tanzania, South Sudan, it's very difficult to have such an expression against your government publicly. And I know like some Ugandans were talking in a way that they were somewhat inspired, although nothing obviously I think has happened. In Tanzania, there was even a strike. There was a strike in Dar es Salaam in a famous market called Kariakoo. It was around the same time actually, but I don't know if it was linked to each other. But basically two questions. One, do Kenyans feel that the democratic space is bigger enough for them to express their opinion and the government to listen? Or were they literally was it just like, okay, let's do it, whatever happens, happens, it's fine? Or is there a certain understanding that, okay, no one is going to get killed, nothing crazy is going to happen, this is not Uganda or something? That's one. And then the second one is, do they understand how much of an influence and impact they have made amongst young Africans as well?
Okay, so on the first question, I'd say we have a very active democracy in Kenya, but also we have a very educated population that that does understand that the leaders are actually there to serve us. They're our servants. So I think that's the reason most guys came out. In previous protests, guys get shot, but then it's mostly centered around a political leader who is leading the protest. The former prime minister mostly, Raila Odinga. And this time it was just people saying, we've had enough. So when guys went out on the first Tuesday, guys are like, oh, you were serious about going out. So on Thursday, there were more numbers. Over the weekend, the politicians made those comments about guys going to KFC and whatnot. So guys got pissed. And guys decided, we're coming out. We're going to have at least 1 million people outside on Tuesday. And the best thing is that it didn't just happen in the capital city. There were protests in every single major town in Kenya because it affects everyone. I've forgotten the second question.
Basically, do the protesters and young Kenyans who are active in this, do they understand like the impact they've had around Africa, like how much of an inspiration they actually are? Because everyone is talking about it, you know, from South Africa to Zambia to Uganda, Nigeria. You know, Nigerians are comparing this to EndSARS, the protest that was against police brutality a few years ago.
Yeah. I actually hadn't considered the impact that young people outside Kenya have felt. But yeah, I didn't think about it. I was just out there to tell the man that we're tired. You need to let loose. You can't choke us with your taxes. And I do believe it's a turning point because most young people were very anti-political or anti-politics. So moving forward, it's definitely bringing about a change. People now know they have a voice and are willing to use it. Yeah.
Wow, yeah, that's a good note. But also could you just like give us a window into your experience of the actual protests on, I think you went on Tuesday, or were there several other days as well? But yeah, if you could just give us sort of like a window into the protest, what was it like? Was the mood sort of like a celebratory one, or was it like an angry one? And then I know they also went to parliament. What was all of that stuff like when you guys realized, oh crap, we're going to parliament?
So I did not know people are going to go inside parliament, but essentially woke up, I was going to go to the protest, carried my water bottle, went to the office first in the morning. I took leave, half day leave for the afternoon because I knew I was gonna go out. So even on the road as I was going into the protest, you could just see people moving through, and our office is in one of the affluent areas, and you could see guys walking. When they blocked the roads, guys were determined to get to town. And during the protests, guys were friendly. It was more of a celebratory mood, but also to show them that we have the numbers, we're watching you, and you better take care and listen to us. And yeah, it was fun. I went with a couple of friends and some colleagues. And yeah, it was okay. The tear gas didn't affect us, but we were really afraid that something might go wrong, and it did for some of us who were outside. Yeah. Hello.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, that's really interesting. And sorry, I didn't catch that, but if I'm not mistaken, unfortunately, there were a few lives that were lost during this protest.
Yes.
Yeah, unfortunately, could you just let us know how violent or when it became very violent? Because I also kind of initially when I saw the protest, they seemed to be peaceful. and then all of a sudden this sort of happened?
Let me just be honest. I was not near Parliament because town was very full. I was on Kenyatta Avenue, which is one of the main streets. It's not too far from Parliament, so we did hear the live gunfire. But in Kenya, we do have a very manipulative government that would like to politicize a lot of things and basically try to take credit for a lot of things and also to impose things on people. So from the stories I had, there was a police vehicle that was put on fire. And I believe the reason it got violent is because of the force that the police used. Because people were generally peaceful. But then when you've gone out and you're with your friends, when a plain clothes police officer comes and tries to arrest you for peacefully demonstrating, then you're obviously going to have a pushback. And I think that's when things got a little bit violent. And in a crowd, it's easy for things to get charged very fast. So that was the point at which when they started doing that, that's when there was the pushback. Yeah.
Let's see. So I think
Was that
sorry, go ahead.
was that also kind of unnerving as well? Like, I mean, I heard these, like, I saw these clips of people saying we don't fear, but like clearly there was a loss of fear of what could potentially happen. How real was that?
See, there was guys were not afraid. Guys were tired. I mean, the politicians are men just like us. Some of the protesters were telling the police that we're actually out here protesting so that your life can be better. We want the politicians, not the people you're protecting, and not you. We're not here to fight with you. We have our real bone is with the people seated inside Parliament.
Wait, so just one last question. This there's been, as you mentioned, there's been quite a lot of protests before, and I've asked this question before. So lots of protests before, some have been deadly, and then now they're talking about Ruto must go, right? So
Yeah.
what is so different about these protests, and what is the end game? Like, what's the ideal situation, and who will like, if Ruto does go, who will replace Ruto?
The difference with these protests is that there is no central person mobilizing people. So it's just people who are tired. It's not a politician leading anyone. So luckily, there's nobody for the president or the government to negotiate with. And they just have to comply with what we are asking them. In an ideal situation, the president should resign because he's lost the country. He has actually lost the country and the faith of everyone, because what we have is that a lot of the politicians currently live in a bubble, I believe, where they feel like they're making very good decisions, but they're not in touch with what Vincent, what I am going through. And because they're hidden from all of that and all of the suffering, then they're not able to help us. Currently, I do not know the end game because it's evolving every single moment. And if Ruto were to leave, I honestly don't know who would take over. His deputy is not any better. But I believe the movement of the young people is that we are tired of your old politics and we want you all to go. So the idea moving forward is to start by recalling members of parliament who voted yes. And also those ones, there are some who voted no, but actually oppressing their constituents. There's corruption happening in their constituencies with the levies with the funds that they're allocated and all. So in Kenya, you're allowed to recall your member of parliament 2 years after election. So they were elected in August 2022. So come August this year, guys have even set up a website to help mobilize to recall members of parliament. I don't know how effective it will be, but I do see at least 1 or 2 or 5 members of parliament going home through that. So with that, we'll then be able to get people volunteering themselves to represent people in their constituencies. So hopefully by the time we get to 2027, we'll be able to find a new leader.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting what you just mentioned. And before we close off, because I think we've been a bit over time here, but before we close off, I just wanted to find out from you, as Zengi said, that the protests have been very inspirational across Africa. What's one message that you would like to close off with that like people listening could want to or you'd want people to understand?
The power lies with you, because ultimately it is the people who give the leaders the power. It's not that they are powerful enough. They get power from the people.
Yeah, that's very inspirational. And with that, I think we thank you very much for joining us and listening to Africa for Dummies. And thank you to our guest Tush for joining us. And yeah, see you on the next episode.
Thanks for having me, Nathan and Zenge.
I am an African.